Inside left Eden, soft colours of blue, green, flesh. God is everywhere. Birds swirl, animals drink, pink tower shadows a lake. Strange creatures crawl out.
If ever I see those 40s films, the noir, full of guys and dames, Macs and trilby hats, I'm always struck by how every star just smokes and smokes, makes love and chats through the burning fags and gathering ash. And no one coughs or clears their phlegm, just looks full of glamour, lipstick or moustache gathered round a smoking stick. I have to clear my throat in asthmatic sympathy and wondered how their clothes must smell. Now I look at Hieronymus Bosch and see more people much closer than can bode well. So please repaint your garden, Mr. H.B. Your social distancings don't work for me.
In the beginning was the Word, then the world, followed by light and darkness. Then Adam arrived out of nowhere, a fully formed naked man. He found himself in a beautiful garden full of fruit trees, lakes and animals, and a towering pink fountain which looked like an elaborate cake decoration. He was told by a guy with flowing pink robes that matched the colour of the fountain that as long as he stayed in the garden and obeyed the rules, he would live. The rules were to keep 2 meters apart, wear a mask when travelling, and don't eat from the tree of knowledge. Adam only really understood the last rule. After weeks of eating fruit and stroking animals, Adam became bored, and so he was allowed a companion. Eve arrived one morning, cheerful and bright, asking if he'd like to make a video and put it on YouTube. Adam didn't know what to say. He was mesmerised by her nakedness and her long wavy hair, which meandered right down to her feet. Adam explained the rules to Eve, and she had a few questions. Have the masks been supplied, or do we have to make our own, was the first. How far can we travel, and where can we go, was the second. And are the toilets open, was the third. I don't know, Eve. I didn't make the rules, he said. It's completely baffling to me. After a few weeks, Adam remembered that if they both self-isolated for 14 days, they could be together in a bubble. Eve seemed annoyed at this as she said, Now you tell me, and I've spent all those nights in the freezing cold, and I could have been cuddling up to you. But that changed things, and Eve got her wish. Soon, however, boredom set in again. Eve asked if she could set up a Zoom meeting, maybe use Skype or even watch America's Got Talent on Netflix. Again, Adam was perplexed. Instead, Eve just chatted all day, and because Adam seemed to like sitting in a cave a lot, she talked to the animals. She loved the cat. the giraffe, the three-headed lizard, and the unicorn. She didn't expect any of them to talk back to her. But one day, a snake arrived and suggested she try one of the apples from the tree of knowledge. He said they were at their best and he'd get one for her. Anything for a bit of excitement, so she agreed and gave Adam a piece. Then all hell let loose. The guy with the pink robes turned up and was raging at both of them. Adam was furious with Eve, saying it was all her fault. Eve said nobody had forced him to eat the apple and that he should take responsibility. But all said and done, they had broken the rules and they had to leave the garden. Eve was quite philosophical, saying, well, at least nobody died, and now, God willing, I can get my hair cut.
Of course, we were never told anything. What I learned in the schoolyard at first seemed about as implausible as my parents' religious beliefs. Most parents avoided the sex talk. However, my friend David Hudson's mother was obviously more enlightened. To Dave's utter horror, she took him into the kitchen and told him to sit down. I think it's time we had a little talk, David. Dave stared at the floor, buttocks firmly clenched. She went on, you know how your sister's starting to grow hair under her arms? Yes. Well, in a year or two, you'll get hair growing under your arms too. And that was it.
Middle panel, life. They're all having such weird fun cavorting. Or pain. Full of carnal bliss, succulent like intestines. How do you do that? Hallucinating? No holds barred in this flesh palace. Do we feel envy? Juxtapositions, images on images, juicy, delicious. Globes and eggs are here, but what's happening inside? Yes, we want to know. Fertile with water, a barrage of ripened life.
I was out having a walk with my mum yesterday and we were going to go to the park because there are ponds and things there. There are horses and all, lots of them. Well, at least there were yesterday. When we got to Toppet Hill near Park, we looked down and there were all these people. And don't tell anybody, but I don't think any of them had any clothes on. My mum started to get really mad because she said that they shouldn't be doing that in the park. So I asked her what they were doing, and she said they must be rehearsing for a play about the old tenement of the Bible, because it looked like the Garden of Eden. I thought that was a bit queer, because tenements don't usually have gardens. I know that because my friend from school lives in this old block of flats, and she says it's a tenement, so they can't grow flowers or potatoes or oat. I asked Mum if people in the Bible played silly games without their clothes on, and she told me I shouldn't be watching. She said it was a long time ago and they didn't have a lot of clothes then. I said that I haven't got a lot of clothes now, so could I go and have a go at the game with the lady standing on her head and balancing a great big strawberry between her legs? I'm good at standing on my head. Mind you, I have to put my legs up against a wall, else I'd fall over. Mum said, certainly not. I don't want you to do any of those things. I don't know why she said that, because she's always telling me to listen to what the Bible says and be like Jesus. Now she's saying don't. Maybe the people in the old tenement were a bit common and poor. Maybe that's why they haven't got any clothes. I could see a man with a bunch of flowers sticking out of his bum. And then I asked my mum why. She said maybe they couldn't find a vase, but it was a silly place to put them, because if he sat down they'd get crushed. Maybe they should give them to that lady trapped in a big piece of fruit. That might cheer her up a bit. I hope they're only doing this play once, because they'll be leaving loads of mess in the park, and when anybody does that, my mum always makes us go and clean it up next day. She says it's about being good city men or something. Why didn't somebody tell them in the Bible that?
Jonathan Joe has a mouth like an O and a wheelbarrow full of surprises. The widow Ramsden thought she heard the postman, but there was nothing on the coconut mat in the hall. Not even a cheap pizza promotion or a billet with the factory warehouse's eye-watering deals. She opened the front door and peered over the brass security chain. There it was on the stone step, an assemblage. She gasped. She ran a gamut of emotions, from how audacious to a more thoughtful, I never knew you felt like that. And finally the full Dick Emery. Oh, you are awful, but I like you. Not that she would ever have felt like handbagging Jonathan Joe. Her authority shot in sharp shafts from her ever-vigilant sapphire eyes. She never missed her target. But Jonathan Joe had never been in her sights up until then. Jonathan Joe was in the habit of dropping off surplus veg from his allotment on her doorstep. His fresh plucked peas in their shells were divine, and his new potatoes surpassed Jersey Royals, smeared with chive butter and sea salt. She ran her tongue over her painted lips. She welcomed these offerings, especially since lockdown. This practice had started shortly after the departure of her late husband. In the end, Percival's passing was a mercy. His dementia had exhausted her. His delusions troubled her, and his incontinence offended her sense of decorum and decency. The local GP told her not to take it personally. "Soldier on," he quipped. There's a language in flowers, she thought, but this, the message was unambiguous. A whopping marrow with 2 ripe tomatoes artfully placed at the stalk end, either side. Why, it must almost challenge the Gibbs world record marrow, 128 pounds, grown on a Leicestershire allotment. Jonathan Joe should have saved it for the show, she thought. But then no show this year. So he'd given it to her. She made that swift transition from lust to love, as women so often do, alas. Poor man's goose. Yeah, that's what her mother would have done. a generous stuffing with sausage meat, brushed with melted butter and a little olive oil, and slow roast for an hour at 200 degrees centigrade. Perhaps she could add some chestnuts. Perhaps Joe would like to share it. Lockdown? Rules were relaxing by the week. What were rules for? A chilled bottle of Hungarian white, al fresco. Where's the harm? They could be flexible, shielded from the nosy neighbours. Her furrowed brow relaxed, and lovely eyes softened and became almost youthful. She patted the back of her hair and wished she could get her roots titivated. Jonathan was bemused to receive a dinner invitation from the widow, but he was never one to turn down a free fill, lamb to the slaughter that he was. They will never know that it was the passing standing postman who towed the 3 items into position out of sheer devilment.
The birds and the bees, said Reggie Wainthropp, looking at Laura over the table and gesturing towards the sculpture he'd just made out of silly putty during free play. Laura stared blankly at him. It didn't look like a bird or a bee to her. The birds and the bees, he repeated, nodding and raising his eyebrows in a somewhat challenging way. It's a girl's thing, you know, he declared. Strange, thought Laura, and embarrassing. Why did he do that? She could see where he was coming from with his representation, but she wasn't sure that Reggie shouldn't know. She'd been told to keep her private parts to herself. So she gave him a knowing but disdainful look to cover all options, and he laughed and looked across at their fellow table member Robert for support. Robert laughed too, but Laura wasn't sure he knew why. There's something going on here, she thought. What is this birds and the bees thing? Must find out for tomorrow. Can't have Reggie knowing something I don't. She was almost 10 and in her last year at their small village primary school. Although possessed of an inquiring mind, she had not yet pondered much on how life came into being, not for any species, birds, bees, or otherwise. She'd seen plenty of cows mounting each other in the fields, of course, but she just thought they were having fun. Well, that's what her father had told her when she'd asked him about it once on one of their Sunday morning walks. He laughed as he said it, but she didn't know why. He often laughed at her questions. Sometimes he just laughed without answering a question at all. It was as if she'd been telling him a joke and no answer was required. She never got the joke, but then, of course, adults were like that, she'd found. Her mum and dad would often laugh at something. Then when asked why, they'd say, "It's for adults only. You'll know when you're older." In the end, it had just seemed prudent to wait until she was an adult herself so that all would be revealed. She couldn't wait to be in on the joke. This time, however, she knew she couldn't chance waiting and making a fool of herself at school the next day. She'd see if her mum could help. She caught her mother that evening as she went past Laura's bedroom after tucking her younger brother in. "Mummy," she called, "I need to ask you something." "Yes," her mother said, coming into Laura's bedroom and sitting down on the bed. "The boys are talking about the birds and the bees at school and laughing. What does it mean?" Her very modern 1960s mother flushed slightly, then took a deep breath and launched into a graphic, factually accurate description of the facts of life, including appropriately named human body parts. Mrs. Carstairs had been waiting for this moment and she was going to do it right. No beating about the bush for her. She told Laura straight. She wasn't laughing. Laura's mouth fell open. It had all come so out of the blue. She was rather taken aback. It seemed so implausibly unhygienic. So the man and the woman, she gestured, and then there's a baby. Her mother nodded, observing her disbelieving face, then flushed again. Well, that's it, she said as she hurried out of the room. If you've got any more questions, let me know. And she was gone. Well, Laura did have a question. It was all very well knowing what a man and a woman did to make a baby, but her original question was still unanswered. What about the birds and the bees? Her mother had not mentioned them at all. She still had no idea. It was going to be another very confusing day with Reggie tomorrow.
We older women were indoctrinated at an early age with the importance of getting your man. The task becomes more complex with age, and you really need a spreadsheet to store all the information. The first issue is where all the available men are at an age when most are either partnered or dead. The answer is that they are obsessive about some hobby. 2 examples must suffice. If you are a walker, you must keep going until walking 18 miles up steep hills is easy. The serious male walker tends to value distance and difficulty above scenery or flora and fauna. If he's a train enthusiast, you need to know if he loves helping run steam trains. If he does, you must be ready to freeze or fry in a ticket booth on your own. On the other hand, if he just loves riding on steam railways, this might be more fun if you can afford it. If it's model railways he loves, don't even think about it. If some man catches your eye, stop to check if he's available. For example, ask, does your wife like walking too? The answer you want, of course, is either, what wife? Or, we were divorced 3 years ago. Then you must persuade this man to take an interest in you. This requires a rigorous study of the subject of his obsession to aid conversation, plus ensuring that whenever his club meets, you're there next to him, ready to flatter him whenever this is feasible. Once he's taken the bait, it's time to assess your prize. Did he have a mum who did everything for him until she died? Does he therefore expect any woman to do cleaning, laundry, cooking, shopping, etc. for him? Is his conversation interesting or entirely about his obsession? Does he have a decent home and car, or rather like the idea of sharing yours? Finally, is he any good between the sheets? Possibly so good it makes up for deficiencies elsewhere. Sorry, lady, but after all that hard work, you may have to throw this one back.
Right panel, chaos. Satanic mills shaft the sky, and harp music plays. Where do I look now? Knife between ears, artist peers, senses overwhelmed. Many images, people, drums, strange bird eats a man, surreal visions.
All year they consorted, floated, drove interlopers with their sweep. Come spring, they made a nest together, made love. She laid eggs, sat on them. He hovered, watching. Dagger eyes at anyone going past, the stab of his beak. He brought her morsels. Sometimes she ate, sometimes she didn't. Food wasn't a need anymore. Neither was he. He laughed about the times they'd sailed in for the bread. Wings akimbo, scattering the mallards and geese. She looked into the distance. No reply. He tried to come close, give his warmth to their cygnets in the shell. She reared up, flapping her wings, turning on him like an enemy, a stranger. He stepped into the water, casual, preening his feathers, drifted a bit, looked back. She was settled again, looking straight ahead. He didn't exist. He went to their hunting grounds. There he might see why he had been exiled, what he could do to be taken back. Days passed. He stood on the shore, pulling out his long feathers. At his feet lay snowdrifts in May. His hope that she would come looking for him proved false. When he returned, she was as he'd left her. Focus in her face, leaner in the neck, belly spreading on their nest. She met his approach with the same response. He left. He would wait. When he saw her gliding down one day, he took off towards her. Flying low, his wings beating on the water like giant claps. He landed, circled her. She nodded to him, as if the time in between had meant nothing. They floated together. He felt the strength in his legs as he pushed the water. When she tucked her neck into her back to sleep, he paddled up to the nest. Broken eggshells, half-formed fetuses, like petrified insects in amber. He remembered. Every year, the smashed twigs, her feathers amongst them. Each time, the same result. No babies. Later, his wife, as if her memory had been wiped. He noticed her eat certain herbs, groom herself, stiffen when the ice began to thaw. Each year, his exile and her rage opening wide to swallow them both.
Two monks stand in front of an altarpiece, a triptych. They are puzzled and a little perturbed. This artist chap, he was given a brief on what was required, wasn't he? Yes, Your Grace. He was given the enhanced project fear brief. Scare the, if you'll pardon the expression, the shit out of the peasants. This is what happens if you ever think about sinning. So what, and I'm using the term advisedly, possessed him to come up with this? I cannot imagine, Your Grace. Perhaps he was visited by demons, or maybe it was the bread. Bread? Yes, Your Grace, or to be more precise, the flour, rye. When it becomes damp, it becomes mouldy. Our herbalists say it causes fevers of the brain, strange visions, if eaten. Do you remember the nuns at St. Helga's last winter? They got very hot under their habits, lewd and libidinous behaviour. Brother Edmund looks round, drops his voice. Well, Your Grace, when the Inquisition investigated, they discovered the rye was mouldy. And when I was a young novice, there was an outbreak in my monastery, most distressing. We discovered the cellarer in the refectory pleasing himself with a courgette. Brother Edmund shudders. I have never been able to look at anything from the Marrow family since. Brother Barnabas thought he heard the Lord telling him to go forth and multiply. He reaped havoc. No milkmaid, serving maid or peasant woman was safe from ravishment. He was missing for a week. We found him exhausted in the arms of a surprisingly non-concerned burgomaster's wife. The bishop crosses himself. Good Lord! Yes, Your Grace, our herbalist has started to hear whispers that some, particularly the arty types, are seeking out the mould, deliberately ingesting small amounts of it to bring on pleasing visions. Unfortunately, some of the visions are not at all pleasing. Brother Edmund looks at the triptych. I rather think this might be one, what the herbalist calls a bad trip. The bishop looks a little closer at the triptych. I think we'll just hang it in a very badly lit chapel and forget about it. He looks round, drops his voice. We don't want to have to explain it to the Inquisition. Yes, Your Grace, that would not be a pleasant experience. I know just the place, the mortuary chapel of the Van Clomps. Who? Where? Exactly, Your Grace.
I'll be in touch once I've checked your gaff for damage to the fixtures and furniture. Your bond. Are you having a laugh? Be thankful that I've been firm and fair. So you'll be hearing from me before long. Expect prophets and other desert ravers to keep you in the loop, tell right from wrong. Tablets of stone, a range of soul savers. No teenage tantrums now, Adam and Eve, orchard robbers and the tenants from hell. Close the door quietly before you leave. No more treating this place like an hotel. Now, get some kit on, there's a touch of frost. This is your new world. Paradise is lost.